Returning now to one of our top stories, the unprecedented show of military force to defend the peaceful transfer of power. And it's not just here in Washington. Nick Schifrin has more.
The FBI says there are threats to all 50 state capitals this weekend when federal authorities warn there could be armed protests. In Pennsylvania, there will be 450 National Guard protecting the Capitol in Harrisburg. The Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor is John Fetterman, and he joins me now. Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, welcome to the NewsHour. What's the threat that Pennsylvania faces, and what are you doing to protect your capital?
Well, I mean, the threat isn't necessarily a specific one, it's more of a general one. And the governor had taken the preemptive steps to close the Capitol complex all next week. So if they do have a protest, which of course, as long as it's peaceful, that's of course their constitutionally protected right to do so. And in the event that it does, get out of hand, which I don't expect that it would, there is a robust presence there that would deter anything that go along those lines. When I was just at the Capitol this past Tuesday, we had armed National Guardsmen with automatic weapons, and there's a much different vibe and a much different energy than there was just 1 week ago when I was there, when it was a very casual, laid-back atmosphere, even though there were a couple hundred angry Trump protesters right there on the front steps.
Are you getting enough federal help?
I can't speak to that specifically, but what I can say is that this is an issue that has been the #1 priority for the governor and the Capitol Police Department in Harrisburg, and they have taken every preventative step to make sure that there are no exposed vulnerabilities, that the complex is shut down. And I really, again, don't anticipate that there's going to be anything on the order of what happened in in Washington last week, especially since no one's there and the entire complex is closed this entire upcoming week.
You said there was no specific threat. I wonder if we could talk more generally about that general threat. The FBI just a few months ago labeled Pittsburgh a hub for white supremacy, for extremist groups. Is that a particular concern for you going forward?
Well, you have to consider every angle. I mean, last Wednesday in Washington changed everything. I mean, this idea that you would have a mob take over the entire Capitol complex was unheard of, unprecedented. No one thought that, and that's why there wasn't the kind of security there, because no one ever believed that that was possible. So, after that, everything's possible, and there is an entirely new level of scrutiny and possibility that is being considered to make sure that there is a peaceful transfer of power and that there is no kinds of insurgency in certainly in Harrisburg, and I suspect all across Pennsylvania as well too. The National Guard and the governor's office is in close contact with all other law enforcement agencies. And as I said, there isn't a specific plot in mind that I'm aware of, but nevertheless, everyone is on high alert just to make sure that everything goes smoothly, and whatever protests there are peaceably, constitutionally guaranteed rights to protest.
You say anything is possible. I'm wondering if you could help us understand this moment we're in U.S. history. Pennsylvania, of course, one of the original colonies. It ratified the Constitution in 1787. Here we are 233 years later talking about insurrection. Where are we today as a country?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I watched those events on the television where they took over the Capitol, much like everybody else did. It felt very 9/11. It felt very surreal. But what we have to remember is, on the upside, that the guardrails held in America. And Pennsylvania was the target of more smears and lies regarding our electoral security than any other state. And at the end of the day, we had 3 instances of voter fraud out of over 7 million ballots cast. And the Justice Department, the president's own Justice Department, just signed off on the fact and said there wasn't any fraud or any activity that would closely resemble that in Pennsylvania. So, what kind of a new era are we in? We're in an era that we're not able to take the peaceful transition of power for granted, like we were able to for the entire history of our country. And that needs to change. We can never look at that again. And we also have to confront this idea that when you are maliciously lying and creating and fomenting chaos, that can't be permitted on a platform that affords you to spread things in an unprecedented speed to an unprecedented number of people. And this idea of slapping a warning on these kind of things, that doesn't include the fact that, but for this idea that this election was stolen and rigged and they're trying to steal this country from you. I mean, there's a straight line from those kind of incendiary statements, banging, repeatedly being tweeted, retweeted, and repeated for 2 months straight. And it all culminated in what happened in Washington, D.C. I mean, there's a lot that has to be considered. So this is never, ever part of the American story again. And we can get back to one of the pillars of our democracy, and that is the peaceful transfer of power.
John Fetterman is the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania. John Fetterman, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Judy?
And now, Nick, let's turn to another story that you've been reporting on today. Last night, you described a series of policy changes that were announced at the very end of the Trump administration. Tell us what the Biden transition team is saying to you in response.
Yeah, Judy, many administrations rush through policies at the last minute, especially when there's a especially when there's a change of party. And the administration has rushed through policies on Yemen, Cuba, Taiwan, and Iran. So far, the Biden administration had been shying away from criticizing individual policies, but that changed today. A Biden transition official in an interview told me, quote, "We will manage this, but if it does start at some point to feel like sabotage." The official singled out the designation of the Houthi group in Yemen over the objection of humanitarian groups who say that designation will make the world's worst humanitarian disaster even worse. The Biden transition official told me, quote, "Secretary of State Pompeo is literally risking hundreds of thousands of lives. Most of Yemen is at risk of starvation so that Mike Pompeo can feed his own domestic political ambitions. This is childish and silly, and we're not going to let it box us in." In response to that, a senior administration official told me, quote, "We are designating the Houthis as terrorists for a simple reason. They're terrorists. The Houthis and no one else are responsible for the humanitarian crisis Yemen faces." But Judy, even humanitarian groups today are calling for that designation to be rescinded.
And Nick, I know there's so much to report on, but just in brief, what are the main foreign policy challenges that the Biden administration is going to face from the very beginning?
Yeah, the challenges are widespread, and the plans on day one for the Biden team in terms of foreign policy are rejoining the World Health Organization, rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, and rescinding executive orders that ban travelers from majority Muslim countries. In the first few days, the Biden team will have to figure out how to extend the New START treaty. That is the treaty that governs American and Russian strategic weapons. And in the first few weeks or months, the Biden team will kickstart diplomacy with Iran.
Nick Schifrin covering security issues in this country and abroad. A lot on your plate. Thank you, Nick.